Hello and welcome to Kingdom in Context. I'm Sean. I want to thank you for joining us here for a special broadcast as we're going to be interviewing Candid Truth. Mikey Jenny, his wife was going to be able to join us. She's not, but it's okay. We got Mikey here. He's going to be able to share with us about his new channel, the vision for it, and everything. And I just want to say welcome to everyone in the live chat. I anticipate this to be an awesome conversation. He's been doing good work over there. I just want to say thank you for everyone that is here in the live chat. Be sure to give it a thumbs up. Help us get in the algorithm because it's also going to help him get some extra exposure for his channel as well. So, welcome everyone. And let me see if I can find this real quick. I don't know how this is. 1 second. Just want to say a big shout out to everyone that is one of our patrons, guys. Many of you have just completed our basic course we've been doing for the last 3-4 months. We've been doing a basic Bible course going over through the major themes of Scripture, and it's called basic, but there's a lot of material. We ended up having like 50 plus hours of extra content. You can access that on our Patreon and also as a member on our YouTube channel as well. So if you're interested in that, if you want extra content to listen to while you work or while you're driving, there's a ton of it, and it's all Bible, except for how we formed our Bibles, which is the first class to where I go through the history of how we formed our Bibles. So, but the rest of it is just all scriptural exegesis as much as possible. And I think you'll enjoy that. It's also an easy way to support the channel. So if you guys are interested in that, be sure to check that out. Also, I just want to do a quick hello and thank you to everyone that's already supporting our Days of Noah efforts. So we are creating a animated, Christian animated cartoon, but it's better than any cartoon that I could imagine as a kid. We're going over the lifespan of Noah, 400 years before the flood to 300 years after the flood, leading up to the Tower of Babel. And we're super excited about it. We think that people are really going to enjoy this. And so I can prompt this real quick and we'll... sorry, guys. It was loaded, but no, it's not. Okay. Let me see if I can get this prompt up real quick. Hopefully the audio is going to be good. Let's see here. This is our... That is our Days of Noah animated series we're working on, guys. If you want to be a part of that, you want to support that, links in the video description below as well. You can be a part of Patreon and get behind the scene. It's content, extra artwork as it's in production. And so that's been something we have ongoing. Thank you guys so much for already supporting that. You guys are amazing. And we're excited to be, Abba willing, within the next couple of months, be able to release episode 1 and 2. We'll be finished with it. And so just a big shout out to everyone that's helping us make that a reality. So you guys are awesome. Without further ado, guys, let's bring on our brother, Mikey Jenny. He is in the studio. What's going on, Mikey?
What's up, man? Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a while since we did a little video together.
Yeah. It's great to see you again. Good to have you on. And you have been busy.
Yeah, man. A lot's changed. If anybody recognizes me, maybe they recognize me from Little Light Studios. If you guys don't know who Little Light Studios, go check them out. They've been a ministry for about 15 years, exposing a lot of the agendas in Hollywood, especially Disney and Marvel, and a lot of subtle things that we missed. And I worked with them for 7 years, giving presentations to different churches and events. And about a year ago now, it's been almost right up on 12 months now, God really impressed on my heart to start our own ministry. And when I say our, I mean my wife. We've been married for over a year now. And
Congratulations.
thank you, brother. Thank you. Met her at Little Light, kind of. I already knew her through social media, and just briefly had talked to her during a hard time in her life. She was going through some stuff, and she was really reaching out to ministries to get prayer and stuff like that. And I was really the only one that reciprocated. And that was like 4 years before we actually met. But I had talked to her off and on, and maybe like once a month for like 30 minutes, I'd hear her out and pray with her and stuff. And there was really nothing outside of that. I know people listening are like, oh, okay, I see where it started. But there really was nothing. It was just prayer. And actually, she was in such a bad place at that time that there really wasn't any kind of attraction or anything. You know, it was just like she was going through a really rough time. And but she's looking for people that believe the way she did and who would pray with her about some things. And then I fell into some really hard stuff too. So this was started about 4 years ago now. My mom had a stroke that just made her not in her right mind. And 6 months later, had my 15-year-old special needs daughter pass away.
Oh, and I'm really sorry to hear about that.
Yeah, man.
My condolences, man.
Yeah, and then right immediately after that, my former wife of nearly 10 years was like, yeah, and I want a divorce. And it's just really crazy, like a Job experience, man. Like in 6 months, lost my mom, my daughter, my wife at the time, and then I only got to see my other surviving daughter. She's 14 now, but I started only get to see her on the weekends. And so, God can really reach you when you're at your lowest place. And I think about Joseph. He had to go through the pit before he could go to the palace. And there's a lot, Job, of course. Job went through that experience. And that was the closest to God I ever got. I mean, that's when I started memorizing Bible promises by the pages. Like I was handwriting Bible promises in a book. I had like 5 pages and I literally memorized them. And yeah, I know Satan was really trying to attack me, because at that point, that's when I had first started really going around the US and even other parts of the country or outside the country, to share these messages that are exposing his deceptions. And I think the one that angered him the most, it seems like, was this exposing this alien deception. And at the time, it really wasn't talked about as much as it is now. Like the news was starting to say, around COVID time, they started saying, oh yeah, there's sightings here and there and all that. And the government has like 180 days before they have to tell us everything they know about UFOs. But
how'd that work out? What's it been, like 2.5 years now?
Longer than that, like nearly almost 4 years. Well, yeah, like oh, you mean like when they had to expose it or whatever?
Yeah, they didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't expose anything. They didn't disclose anything.
Well,
other than what
so
we already knew.
Right. It's just now it's not weather balloons and swamp gas. Now they're saying, no, we see them. But yeah, I mean, over the years, though, if you've kept up with it, man, it's gotten really crazy, because they went from saying, when I was growing up, it's all swamp gas and weather balloons, to military pilots and stuff saying, yes, they're real. We see them every day. And then a couple months later, a whistleblower comes out. And I say, quote unquote, whistleblower. There's no such thing as a whistleblower on mainstream media news. I mean, it's all controlled, man. So if it's in mainstream media news, it's what they want you to believe. And so a supposed whistleblower came out and was like, oh yeah, the government's hiding it, and we actually communicate with non-human intelligences. And the interviewer was like, so are they alien? He's like, I don't like to say where they come from because we don't really know. They could be interdimensional. And I'm like, what, dude? Like, tell me you're talking to demons without telling me you're talking to demons. You know, it's like we talk to interdimensional, non-human intelligences. And
I
then it
think
went
Alex
from,
Jones calls them the machine elves.
oh, yeah, you see those when you're on DMT and stuff. Yeah.
That's what Alex
And
Jones refers to them as.
yeah, you know, I got totally sucked into that thing, man. My whole life, I've been a truth seeker, an open-minded, truth-seeking skeptic. And in elementary school, in the public school system, was checking out books on ghosts and aliens and stuff. And so I've been a believer ever since second grade. When I'm looking at these, you know, there's a ghost in the hallway, or there's a UFO on a, and I'm reading all the, you know, there's like police reports and all this stuff back in, you know, 92 or something like that. And I became a Christian at age 9. And then I got seduced by the media, you know, MTV, you know, MTV Spring Break, everybody's in bikinis, hooking up, getting drunk, and there's a band on stage and it looks awesome. And then violent video games that I wasn't supposed to play. You know, my parents tried to protect me from all this stuff, but I I started Mortal Kombat, you know, the first fighting game that had blood in it and do fatalities and all that, and it was fun.
Bro,
And
my mom threw it away. She raided my bedroom because my
oh
aunt had
man,
gotten me the Sega Genesis version of Mortal Kombat that had the blood code
with actual blood, yeah,
with actual blood. So my mom saw me playing it, so she went to my room and like ripped it out and threw it away. And I was
you're
I didn't think
mad,
anything, I was just mad because I'm a 13-year-old kid. Like, why are you taking
right?
this game away? But yeah, she was not happy about it.
Yeah, our parents were smart, man. They came from a different time. They came from a different era, you know. And so I remember when I was a kid, I was gifted Castle Gray Skull, like the big He-Man
Yeah.
castle,
That
and the
was something
He-Man.
back in the day. That
Yeah,
was a big
dude.
deal back in the day.
I came home from school one day and it was gone, and I asked my mom where it was, and she had thrown it away in the dumpster, man. And it's like
No.
it's a skull you go into the mouth,
Right.
and you got a puppet with a snake and all this stuff. And you know, we look back at that and we say, "Oh man, that's just cheesy, you know, cheesy cartoon or something." But it was so full of spiritualism. I mean, sorcery and everything. Like the intro, it's like our friend the sorceress, and he had like that ghost with the
Oh
red
yeah,
cloak and
the
stuff.
lady, one of the lady characters was a sorceress, wasn't she?
Yeah.
In whatever world he meant is in. I can't remember what they call that place.
Oh yeah,
Either way.
where was
But yeah,
that?
there was a
Yeah.
sorceress supreme, I think, or maybe her name was.
Yeah,
But
Sorcerer Supreme, man.
yeah,
And it's like, dude, this stuff is right in our faces. I mean,
because they're making a He-Man movie right now,
oh wow,
a live
doesn't
action
surprise me.
He-Man movie. Yeah,
Yeah, they just love to reboot everything. You know, the craft really sucked me in during that same time period. You know, of MTV and Mortal Kombat and Beavis and Butthead and all that stuff. And when I saw Marilyn Manson on screen for the first time, something in me was like, I want to be just like that. And so at 11 or 12 years old, I started really having skeptical thoughts about the faith that I had just accepted as a 9-year-old kid. I was going to youth groups and everything where I was surrounded by teenagers I looked up to, and they're going on mission trips and all this stuff. And back then we were listening to like DC talk and stuff. And it was a really cool youth group actually. And they knew how to really connect with the kids. And I don't know if I'd agree with it all today, but it was, I remember burning my comic book cards. I had these comic book cards that had like Venom and stuff on it, and they were like really nice, like stiff, glossy. And I threw them in a grill, and that was the first time I seen green fire. And I was like, dude, that's a demon or something. Like I'd never seen green fire in my life. Um, but then real quickly, the media is so powerful. The media is so impactful. People want to deny it. They try to live in denial, like, I'm not affected by that stuff. And then you look around, why do people say the things they say? You know, why do people have these trendy slogans? Why do people dress the way they do? You know, everything that you look around in our culture is called pop culture for a reason. You know, it's
right.
life imitates art. So we're seeing that. I mean, I'm not exempt from it. I still say quotes from movie lines and stuff, you know, and it's like, to think that we're not affected by it is just ignorance. I mean, these companies spend millions, if not billions of dollars on some 30-second advertisement because they know they're going to get the money back. It really does work. And it's interesting that I just watched this interview with Grant Morrison. You know who that is?
Huh.
So he's this bald guy that he's a writer for DC Comics, a writer and an illustrator for DC Comics, like one of the biggest well-known
Okay.
ones of
So
our time.
that's where I've heard the name, because I've heard the name,
Yeah.
but I couldn't tell you who it was. That makes sense. I've heard that then.
Yeah, he's a self-professed magician and all this stuff. And I was watching this him give a speech to a big crowd in like the year 2000 or 2001 called Disinfo was the name of the thing. He was at the convention, and he was adamant telling people that sigil magic works. He said, anyone can be abducted by aliens. He said, you know, I went to Kathmandu in the 90s and got abducted by aliens because that's what I went there to go do, and they'll really show up. And he said, write this down. Like he's like angry with people because he's like, don't just listen to this and sit there and not do it. It works. You can be rich and famous and you can get anything you want. And so he's saying, you know, you think of anything you want. So say like a Tesla or something, and you remove the vowels. So you just got TLS, and you take those. And if there's like doubles of any consonant, then you remove the doubles and you just have all these consonants. And he said, you arrange those consonants into something that looks magical, a shape that he said, the more magical, the better. But when you do that, that sigil becomes like your spell for manifesting things that you want. And he was, and I looked into it, sigils and stuff. It comes from Lesser Keys of Solomon. And some sigils are already pre-existing, and they actually are, I don't know the right word. They're connected to different angels, demons, and entities. And so
Like
it's a process to summon demons. And he said in that thing, he said, well, why have they hidden this from us for thousands of years or whatever? He said, well, because like Coca-Cola knows about it and this and that. So he like started putting these corporations on blast. This dude's not a believer, at least not a Christian believer, but he knows that these major companies.
You said he's a self-professed witch or magician,
right? Yeah. So you look at symbols like VW, Volkswagen. They did that. VW. They put those logos together. A lot of baseball teams do that and stuff too. But I don't even know why I got on this rant. But I'm talking about that there's power in media.
A recent video you were talking about.
Yeah,
recent video you did on your channel.
Right. I was talking about the power of media and how it's influential, and that they even these companies even get involved in sorcery. And so it really makes that verse in Revelation come to life when it says the merchants were the great men of the earth, and that they deceive the whole world through sorcery, which is pharmakia, which could have many different, applications. I believe it's pharmaceutical world. I believe it's anything that medicates the mind, entertainment, all that stuff. It shuts down your frontal lobe of your brain. But yeah, one of the most recent videos.
I'm not going to get too graphic, but in the ancient world, they mixed drugs with sex with music for services or sacrifices to Molech. So what are the big three things that we see that they try to corrupt the culture with?
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, man. Sex, drugs,
real
and music,
quick,
like you just said.
Yeah, exactly. Because they would the priests would possibly do drugs, depends on which clan. Definitely with the Mayans, but they would have the drums going, so you couldn't hear the screams of the people being sacrificed, or the babies in the bronze bulls, because they would put them in there alive. And then of course you had other things like in Exodus 32 at the golden calf experience, when it says they ate and drank and then they got up to play. Well, that word play in the Hebrew is a word that refers to sexual revelry.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was a common practice. Yeah. That's why it wasn't just. That's why when Moses is coming down the mountain, he says he hears the sound of war, but he was confused. He thought he heard the sound of war because all the people shouting and they weren't screaming because of violence. It was they were engaging in sexual activity after they sacrificed to the golden calf. So it was like that was a common practice. That was their church service. Was they go get out of their mind, get in the flesh, and then music drowned it out the the victims. So it was very much they've just disassembled those elements, and then unless you're at a rave, and all those elements are right back there together.
Right. Even the
Yeah.
Burning Man and all that, the Wicker Man that they set on fire, they just
Yep.
think that's some fun tradition or something.
No, it's right in their face. It's funny. I was to say
Yeah.
real quick before you move on. Back in 2016, I actually met Marilyn Manson.
Oh, what? No way. That's crazy.
I did, man. I
I
was
vaguely remember you reminded me, but I don't remember what the situation was.
yeah, I
You
was
were like
driving
a
an Uber.
driver or something, right?
I was driving an Uber at the time, and actually, I
That's
was
crazy.
working at Enterprise Rental Car as one of the managers. But at night, I would go out and take a few Uber rides to make some extra cash because they didn't pay us enough at Enterprise. And so there was I lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and there was they were filming some. He was a part of some. I want to say it was part of that popular TV show at the time.
Marilyn
What was
Manson?
that popular? Yeah, what was that? He told me he was playing a priest character, and he was in town filming for that character for that TV show. What's the really popular TV show where the guy is selling meth out of his trailer?
Oh,
I can't
Breaking
remember. I
Bad?
can't remember the. Yeah, I think it was a
Yeah.
part of Breaking Bad, like an episode where
Wow.
he was playing a priest in this episode, and so I picked him up from this house where all these other people were there as a part of the film crew, and this girl comes out to the car first, and she puts her head in the car, and she's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, "Hey, I'm Sean. I'm here to pick up. Are you?" It was a girl's name,
Brian
right?
Warner.
And she
Okay.
and she was like, "Well, I just want to ask you, have you ever met a celebrity before?" And I was like, "Yeah, actually, I have. I met a few." And she's like, "Oh, okay. So you're cool?" And I was like, "Sure." I didn't think anything of it, right? But then he
Yeah.
gets in the back seat, and he has like a hat and glasses and a big scarf on, and
Yeah.
100% Marilyn Manson, right? So then we start
Yeah.
talking. He starts talking to me because he wanted to go to Whataburger,
Oh
but
yeah.
it's like 2 a.m. and all the bars had let out. So now they're all flooding to McDonald's and Whataburger. And so it was like we got stuck in the drive-through line for like 45 minutes. And so we're just sitting there
Oh
talking
wow.
about his experiences in Hollywood. And he was telling me all these stories about how he met. He was at this party talking to Leonardo DiCaprio, and Lindsay Lohan comes out, and they both didn't want to talk to her. So they both tried to leave through the bushes, and he got all
Oh
scraped up or
wow.
something like that. And he said he's like, "Man, after we talked for several minutes, he's like, man, I'm really happy that you're my driver because you seem pretty chill." And I'm like, "Yeah, thanks,
That's
man. I
cool.
mean, I'm like, full disclosure, I don't listen to your music, but I know who you are." And he
Yeah.
and he was like, "Well, okay, that's fine." He's like, "But I've had some wild drivers." He's like, this one driver, he was from the Ukraine, and he was just freaking out when I got in the car, and he wouldn't even drive. He
Oh
just
man.
started wanting to pledge his allegiance to me. So this
Wow.
this driver turns around, this foreign Ukrainian guy turns around in the Uber and won't drive. Like, he's so enamored with meeting Marilyn Manson that Marilyn said that this guy said, "I'll do whatever you want. So if you need me to kill somebody, I'll do whatever you want. You just tell me what to do.
Whoa.
I'll do whatever you want." And like, he was just freaking out. And so he said he got
That's
out of that
crazy.
Uber and he called a limo and he had to leave through a different route. And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm not like that. It's okay. It's okay."
But media
So,
doesn't have an effect on you though.
right. Yeah. That's why I was going to tell you the story, because he was admitting how
Yeah.
people worship him,
That's
you
insane,
know,
man.
and here he is just trying to be a snobby celebrity who doesn't want to, mingle with other celebrities, and he's enjoying his limelight at the time and all that.
Hmm.
And here he is kind of at the end of his career, getting a couple gigs on a couple TV shows, because he's
Right.
much older at that time. He's in his 40s at that time. So, but yeah, he was just a normal dude, right? And he was talking about how he
Hmm.
grew up Catholic, and how he mentioned about having double rows of teeth.
I
You
did
ever
not know
seen
that.
somebody with double rows of teeth?
No, not unless they're a shark. I never seen that.
Yeah, check it out. Look it up later. But that's like a thing. It's like a genetic anomaly that some people have, where they'll have like 2 rows of teeth up top or bottom,
Wow. Double the dental
and
bills, I guess.
there's like small little teeth inside your other row of teeth. Um, but he's never like, I can't remember how we got on that topic. I want to say I mentioned something about ancient Nephilim, but I can't remember the entire
No
conversation.
way.
But yeah, I was just anyway. Point is, he surprised me. But I was like, "Yeah, I got a double row of teeth." I was like, oh, that's interesting. I read about that being like a genetic anomaly. He's like, yeah, I've had that since I was a kid. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But he was
Wow.
like, when we got to his hotel, he got out because I at that time I was like, I would open doors for people to get out of my car, because that
Mhm.
girl was with him also. And then he got out and he gave me like a big hug. He's like, "Oh man, you're like, thanks for meeting you, man. You're great." I was like, "Oh, cool, man." And
Wow.
there was a part of me that was like, "All right, it's just a guy. He's being controlled." And
Yeah.
this is what I mean. Like, he's definitely not a believer, right?
Yeah.
But he talked. I can't remember word for word what he said, but he was talking about how what he did. He had handlers, and he was a product. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? His stage show, his music, how he portrayed. He wasn't dressed in makeup. He didn't have the crazy contact lenses in. He looked like a normal person. But he
Wow.
talked about how it was, that time of his life was like a massive production, and he was a
Wow.
product of how they wanted to build him up to promote him. And I
That's
was like,
wild.
I didn't want to say, yeah, I kind of knew that, man. It's there's an agenda there. I didn't want to,
Yeah.
I was trying to keep it somewhat above board, but
Right.
it was an interesting experience.
That is. I used to idolize him too. I don't know if I'd ever go as far as to say I'd kill somebody for him, but I used to dress just like him, pantyhose on my arms and legs and all that stuff. And I was one Christmas, a friend of mine gave me his autobiography, and it's super thick. I mean, it was to me. I'm not a reader, and so I like audiobooks, but that was the biggest book I ever read in my life at the time. Since then, I've read the Bible, and that's probably the biggest book I've ever read because I just don't read big books. But yeah, I didn't know. Did you say he was raised Catholic?
I think he's talking about going to a Catholic school when he was younger.
Okay, I think so. Yeah, I think he did go to Catholic school. I know in that book, before there was like full page pictures in there, before I knew anything. I mean, I was totally asleep, obviously, because I was a Marilyn Manson idolizer. But I look at his style and his ring. He had rings on every finger, and one of them was a Mason ring. And I didn't even know what a Freemason was back then, but now I know. So he's had pictures with Anton LaVey. He wears the Masonic ring. Um, yeah, he has to be part of that. But what's crazy is I was listening to songs back then, and I was raised in church all my life, but now we know that churches really don't teach the whole Bible or anything in depth. But the stuff that he was singing about that I didn't even know what it was until later in life, he had a song called Little Horn, and he said, "Little horn is born," and it was, the song was about the Antichrist. And I'm like, this dude actually has some knowledge of the Bible. Like, you don't. I mean, I was raised in church, and I had never heard that term "little horn" being associated with the Antichrist, and so he had to really do some studying or digging to get some of those lyrics.
Especially in
And
the
it was
90s
interesting.
before, was it an album from the
Yeah.
90s or
Yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Antichrist Superstar,
yeah, before the
like
internet was
93.
widespread.
Right. Yeah. So
So
you'd have
he
to go
definitely,
straight to the Bible.
yeah, he had
So
some exposure for sure. Yeah.
yeah. And that's
He was
in
he seemed
Daniel
highly
even.
intelligent. It's in Daniel, right? It
Yeah.
was Daniel
Yeah.
9.
So I could see
Um,
somebody going to Revelation because they're like, oh, I got this album
right.
called Antichrist Superstar, but he's like digging into Daniel even.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild, man. Um, yeah, I met a few celebrities, but that was like the most memorable. And but he wasn't anything like you see on TV. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was, of course, trying to be incognito because he didn't
Yeah.
want to get attention. But here we are sitting in this drive-through line at Whataburger for like almost an hour. I mean, it was like 45, 50 minutes, and
Wow.
it was just, thankfully it didn't get too awkward. But he had nowhere to really go because the parking lot was filled with people, so it wasn't like he was just
Yeah.
going to get out and start walking around.
Right.
So he enjoyed my tinted windows. But
People
yeah, man,
people
that's
probably
wild.
thought he was Nicolas Cage anyway.
That's
I've seen a
that's
picture
funny.
of him recently, and it says, "Why does Marilyn Manson look like Nicolas Cage trying to be Marilyn Manson?" I was like, dude, it's crazy.
That's true. Once you think about it, he does kind of have that look. Of course,
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is not gonna. Apparently, he doesn't age, so he's
Mm.
he's got some good juice they're giving him.
Man,
But yeah,
there's
man, this is.
some.
Sorry, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
I was gonna ask you real quick. So just because we've been talking about your channel a little bit, but I want to let the audience
Mhm.
know, in case anyone is not familiar with you.
Mhm.
You were talking about some of the things that you're interested in as a teenager, where your life was going. But when did you said you gave your heart to Christ at 9 years old,
Yeah, so gave my heart to
but
Christ at
then
9.
you didn't really like make it real for you until later.
Yeah, because I mean, at that time, it was real. It was my mom was inside of a church we were going to, a non-denominational charismatic church back then, and she was transcribing the pastor's sermon. She was listening to audio cassettes and typing, and on a typewriter. I remember I recently heard a tape of her at a church asking a prayer request to get money for, oh, what is it called, a word processor. I mean, this is like 90s, man. And I was alone by myself in the car because she was in there doing that, and I was just bored as a kid, so I was sitting out in the car in the church parking lot. And in that moment, I really had this realization, like, I'm not, I don't deserve heaven. I can't do anything to earn heaven. I've already sinned. I've already lied, stolen at that time, even, and done bad things. And so I remember giving my heart to Christ and even tearing up and telling my mom, and she was excited and got baptized shortly after that. But then it was, my parents were saying, like, we're not going to watch MTV. We're not going to watch Beavis and Butthead. We're not going to play violent video games. And then I started getting exposed to that stuff because I was old enough. I was like 11. I could stay at home when my parents went to the grocery store or whatever. And then, let's try MTV. It's like that forbidden fruit. Like you want to know, why can't I watch it, I guess. And I'm living proof that media does have an influence on you. It can impact you and it can seduce you into wicked things. And when I saw everyone in bikinis hooking up and all that and getting drunk, like, that looked like a lot of fun, but I knew no Christian should be in that audience. And so I started having these real skeptical thoughts about Christianity. Like, is this all about just rules, and anything fun is of the devil, is what it seemed like. And so I started asking a lot of tough questions. And I remember asking a youth pastor at the door one time after it was over, I said, if God said thou shalt not kill, why did he murder the entire world in a flood? And he was like, well, some things we just won't know till we get to heaven. And I was
Mm.
like, man, that is such a cop out. These people don't even know what they believe. These are ignorant people. And I was never an atheist. I was agnostic. I believed in the paranormal. That's why I was so intrigued with religion and spiritual and supernatural things. But I just thought Christians don't have it. The truth is not in the Bible. And so The Craft came out, and The Craft really seduced me because here you got four high school hotties coming together and doing, and it was not real fantasy. It
Well,
wasn't like Harry Potter.
three. I mean, four is subjective, right? Three, at least three.
Oh man. Well, at least in the new one. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in the old one,
Uh,
but
yeah, I
yeah,
do remember when that movie came out. It was like a stir in my school.
yeah,
Everybody was talking about it. All the girls wanted to be a witch now. Like, it was a
yeah.
big deal.
Almost every, I'll say this, the majority of testimonies I hear of people being interviewed about how'd you get into witchcraft, always The Craft, always the movie The Craft, always Harry Potter, and Ouija boards. These things always suck you in. And my parents didn't want me watching
Harry
that movie
Potter
either.
is like an innocent introduction. Harry
Yeah.
Potter, right? But
Yep.
then you get into movies like The Craft and other
More
things, and then it's like,
teenage.
okay, now it's the seduction of, oh, look, you can get what you want. Your power can be yours.
Yep. Change
Sexuality
the
is
color of
yours.
the street light when you're driving. It was
Yeah.
that power. Like, it didn't look fantasy. They didn't make it look like magic wand and special effects. It was just like, I'm just going to make that light turn green and keep going, or I'm going to change the color of my hair or my eyes, or I'm going to make the boy fall in love with me and all this stuff. And levitating, they float light as a feather, stiff as a board, and all that stuff. And so I was like 12 by the time I was just like completely checked out, like no longer a Christian, but still, of course, and living with my parents, and they still have a lot of control over my life, what I can wear. They're buying my clothes, school clothes, and all that stuff. So, of course, I didn't get to wear the things I wanted to. But age 14, I just said, I was asking, can I get my ear pierced? I'm like, no, I don't want you to get your ear pierced. Can I dye my hair? No. And then I just come out of my bathroom with my eyebrow pierced, and my mom was like, go show your dad. You know, it's just like
Oh, you
they're
did it
at a
yourself?
I did all my piercing myself except my tongue. My friend's girlfriend did that, and my labret I actually had a professional do it. But I used to have I don't know 13 to 15 piercings in my head alone, like all up and down my ears and 2 in my lip, and they're just everywhere. But the eyebrow was the first thing I did myself. At that time, I might have had I might have had like one in each ear. Like they might have allowed me to do that at that time, but I pierced my own eyebrow. And then at that time, it was just like your parents reach a place where you're at a certain age where they're just like, they feel kind of helpless. Like, well, of course you live under my roof, but if we try to push this too hard, he might just run away or hate us forever or whatever. And you just kind of let the bird out of the nest or whatever and kind of let them do their own thing. And so I started wearing all black, everything, eyeliner, fingernail polish, obsessed, like going to bed with Marilyn Manson on repeat on my Discman. It's just insane to think about now, just brainwashing myself with Antichrist Superstar was the name of the CD. And, but yeah, that road was just empty and hopeless. I mean, the internet was new. I was looking up forums and message boards, like, is witchcraft real? Do binding spells work and all this stuff? And I went out actively seeking, like going to a graveyard at midnight and like, I want to see something, and never saw anything. And then I'd I had a Ouija board a guy gave me, and on the lid, it had all these messages that were written out from some Civil War soldier, they said, or something. And so I was like, well, I believe my friend, it worked for him. Like I want it to work for me. And I would go all out. Like I'd put candles out and say, spirits, if you're out there, like talk to me and stuff. And nothing would ever happen. I even had some friends that they had their hands on it and it was moving around. I'd say, let me on there. And it would just not do anything. And what I didn't know was my mom was like intercessory praying for me constantly. She saw her little 9-year-old son who accepted Christ on his own, not because I was in a church and there was some emotional sermon, or I just felt, like peer pressure, or I went because a bunch of my friends went, just me and God. And now she sees this depressed, gothic, listen to metal music, horror movies. That's all it was: horror movies, metal music, and black everything. And so she was just like a desperate mom praying for her son. And she got so desperate that she was like, God, don't you dare let my son die and go to hell. Like she said, I know that sounds bold and sounds maybe irreverent, but I was so desperate to get my son's attention. And she said she knew when she would talk to me about God, or my dad would, that it just pushed me away. Like that's the last thing I want to talk about. Like I love my parents. Let's hang out. Let's go out to eat together, whatever. But I don't want to hear about that. That's your thing. You guys believe that. I don't. And she said, I'm not going to reach him. She accepted. I'm not going to get him. You send somebody that he looks up to, that he will listen to be a witness to him and inspire him to become a Christian. And that came in the form of my older, cooler cousin who I hadn't seen in like 5 years. And he drove 5.5 hours to help me and my dad move to Chattanooga. Unfortunately, my parents were going through a divorce at that time. And so my mom was staying in South Georgia. Me and dad were going to move to Chattanooga, Tennessee. And on that 5-hour drive, my cousin came to help me because he had a pickup truck. And as I was loading up his truck, I overheard him talking to my mom about how he became a Christian. And I was like, what? My cousin became a Christian? Like, but I was at a place too where I was at rock bottom. I mean, I wasn't finding any power. I wasn't seeing it firsthand in the witchcraft stuff. Everything was hopeless and empty. I was plagued with the thought that, why am I here? Like, why even go to school? Why go to work? Like, why wake up tomorrow? I could go to school and become the next rocket scientist or brain surgeon or something, or I could be a jailbird my entire life. What's the difference? If one day my clock is ticking and this thing ends, what's the point of any of it? Like, why? And so to escape, I would just drugs, sex, alcohol, every lustful desire of my flesh, whatever felt good, just do it, because I got one life to live it up. I was practicing YOLO before it was a thing. And I was in the car, or I was in the truck with my cousin on a 5-hour drive, and he just had me captive audience. And he's trying to reach me where I'm at. He sees me dressed like Marilyn Manson, and he's like, man, I know you think this book is just a bunch of old crusty rules, but he said, it's got the answers to life in it, man. He said, I pray and I see miracles happen. And he's like, it's kind of like that magic stuff you're into. And that intrigued me, because I was like, my cousin has no agenda. He's not a pastor trying to fill seats and get tithe. You know, something really has happened to him. And so I said, and he said, don't judge God by all the hypocrites that represent him. And that really spoke to me, because when I looked the way I did, I was judged all the time, and I hated it. My friends, their parents didn't want them hanging out with me because of the way I looked. And then they'd get to meet me finally, and they'd be like, oh, you're nothing like I thought you'd be. And I was like, were you judging me? You know, and here I was judging God. I knew nothing about him except what I heard spewed from behind a pulpit or from some hypocritical Christian's mouth. And so I'd never read his word. And so when I got to Tennessee, me and my dad both had to find jobs. And so I started praying. I said, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me through this word and answer my prayer. I want a job at Hot Topic. Like, that was like my dream job. I hated being fake. I don't want to put on a uniform and say some script, you know, at a restaurant or something. I just wanted to believe in the product, dress like myself and all that stuff. And so I put in an application, didn't hear anything back, even called them, and, you know, I was just like annoying them. And I Xeroxed my application 10 times, and every day I came in there and turned it in for 10 days.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, but it didn't work, because to get a job at Hot Topic, you have to know somebody. Like, there's a lot of weirdos that want to work at Hot Topic, like a lot. I met them all when I finally did get the job. But so you have to know somebody. And so my dad, at this point, I remember having 3 job interviews that I walked out of in the middle. One was a pizza place, a car wash, and a gas station. And at some point they'd say, you know, you can't wear all that stuff in your face, right? And I thought I was moving away from South Georgia to the big city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I was thinking, you know, I'm not going to be judged about this stuff. But back then, this was like 2004 or something, I guess, it was still an issue. Now I see people dress like anything now, but I'd stand up and walk out and say, oh, I didn't know you discriminate against people with piercings. And I remember Domino's was like, it's not discrimination, it's a look. I was like, man, you can say that about anything. Like, we only hire white, straight, male, you know, like, it's a look, you know, it's not discrimination. But my cousin, who me and my dad were staying with until we could get on our feet, this was actually my cousin's sister, the one that was witnessing to me. She said, look, we're trying to help you and your dad get on your feet. He's got a job and you're walking out of interviews. And they knew, like, I was seeking. Like, I started going to their church with them, dressed the way, I mean, Marilyn Manson shirt, bondage pants, pentagram, going to their church. And I thank God that nobody judged me. You know, people were happy I was there, you know, but not everybody has that same experience. There's been people who, prostitutes or whatever, walk in there and they get judged and they get hurt by the church, and they turn completely from God by the way the people treated them. And I'm just so thankful that didn't happen to me. And so I was reading the Bible every day. I was starting to read Genesis, and I was like, man, this makes way more sense than evolution. Like, I never believed in evolution anyway. I was just like, this makes sense. And the Bible had some crazy stories in there, man. I remember getting to a part where Lot's daughters got him drunk in a cave and had sex with him to procreate. And I'm just like, this is a crazy book. Like, how come I've never heard these stories before? It's always right. Adam and Eve. And
don't hear those from the pulpit too often.
Yeah. Even when you hear David and Goliath, you don't hear that, or see the cartoon. You don't see David cut his head off and carry it around. You know, I'm like, dude, the Bible is epic, man. And so I was really getting into it, but I was still, you know, I was praying that prayer. I want that job at Hot Topic. And, my cousins had that conversation with me, like, your dad's got a job and you're walking out interviews. Like, maybe God's trying to tell you that these piercings have become an idol in your life. And I was like, I wasn't even close to hearing anything like that at the time, but I was just like, all right. So I took them out, you know, temporarily, put on a collared shirt, went down this long road, put in an application to every place. And finally, the last place on the road, like it was starting to get dark, like 8 o'clock at night and stuff. And I go in there, and the assistant manager is talking to me at the door, and she goes, "You got lip rings or something?" Because there's 2 holes in my lip. And I said, "Yeah, I had to take them out, get a job working for the man." And she said, "Oh, I understand." And she flipped out a septum piercing that she had hidden in her nostrils. And so literally that, I think, was a connection that,
Sorry, somebody beat me to it. This was going through
what?
my head as you were talking.
Signs everywhere.
Signs everywhere with
Everywhere sign.
signs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from the
Yeah.
90s.
So, I mean, it was literally these holes in my lip, I guess, that were the connection, because she was like, "Come back tomorrow. I want you to meet my manager." Came back the next day. She must have put in a good word for me, got the job. Not the job I was praying for, but I didn't get to work with this lady all the time. And so one of the next times I worked with her, I said, "Yeah, I really wanted a job at Hot Topic." And she goes, "Oh, my best friend is the manager over there." And I was like,
Mm.
"What?" And she goes, "I'll tell her when they have an opening to consider hiring you, that you're a good worker and all that." And 3 months later, I get the job at Hot Topic, the dream job, the job I was praying for. And see, I thought God was some magical genie, like I'm supposed to be sitting in my room and it's like,
Right.
"God, I want a car," and it just goes and materializes right there in your room. But he works supernaturally through the natural. The thing is Hot Topic wasn't hiring at the time. I didn't know anybody. He wasn't going to make somebody drop dead and give me a position. He was working in his perfect timing and got me the job that I didn't want, the job I hated, but it was so that I could meet the person who was best friends with the manager. And 3 months later, the very next time they were hiring, I got the position. And I remember going home, I wrote on a Post-it note, "God got me the job at Hot Topic. Thank you, Jesus." And I stuck it on a mirror. And that was huge for me, because at the time I'm still wearing a pentagram, all black, everything. And I was like, "Okay, I believe you exist. I believe your Bible is true. I believe prayer is true, works, but I'm not ready to become a Christian yet." Because at that time I had just turned 21. I was in the club every night with my friends that I'd met at that restaurant that I was working at and stuff. And then my new friends at Hot Topic. And so I was like, one day when I'm on my deathbed, I'll give my heart to you. Once I had my fun, I get my get out of hell free card. And what a selfish motive. God created us. He wants He wants a relationship with us. And so many of us want to do whatever we want to do, but we want to go to heaven too, or go to, have eternal life. And that, I'm so thankful that he's patient and long suffering, because a lot of things happened in my life. I started a clothing line that started taking off. It was on famous rock stars and models all around the world, and even Soulja Boy's clique and stuff. And then I started rapping with a friend, and it was so crazy that we started having this monthly event where that was the most I'd ever seen this club packed out. Every month was just, and they all came to see us. We were this real gimmicky rap thing that started out as a joke, but everybody loved it. And then Anheuser-Busch said they saw a spike of sales of Bud Ice in the Chattanooga area, because we constantly repped Bud Ice, this cheap, nasty beer. And so they started giving us free beer, an unofficial sponsorship. And then in 2012, we were in California. Like, it happened like so quick. We both go to California. We're at this mansion, girls in bikinis, Bud Ice everywhere, weed, hair and wardrobe. The cameraman worked for MTV reality shows. And I'm just like, how does this happen? Like, how we made it, and so everything in me was like, I'm going to go back to Chattanooga. I'm going to save up some money, and I'm going to move to California, and we're going to make this dream happen. Well, God had just opened my eyes December 2011. I mean, it was like blinders just came off. I mean, I remember exactly when it happened, how it happened, but I was sitting at my computer, and I would been watching little videos here and there about the Illuminati and stuff. But it wasn't enough to give me the big picture. Like, I was saying, okay, Lil Wayne and Drake, these guys sold their souls to Satan. It's obvious. Lady Gaga, whatever. I could not see a big, huge agenda. I just saw there's a couple people sold their souls, and they're, just like Jesus was offered all the kingdoms of the world. That's what's happening now. But in an instant, I stood up out of my seat. I was like, whoa, like, dude, like all these corporate logos are satanic symbols, and Harry Potter is pushing witchcraft. Like I used to think Christians were, you know, little legalistic zealots for saying that stuff. And I'm like, no, it's so clear now. And everything made sense. Like New World Order, like all this stuff's happening behind the scenes, and chemtrails, FEMA camps, all of it. God actually opened my eyes to chemtrails. Before that, I broke down in a parking lot, and I was just, my attention was just on the sky, the completely open sky. And I just kept watching these planes leave these long trails. And for some reason, my attention was on it. And like an hour later, these things were just huge. And I was like, those things look like they're coming down or something. Like they just look big. You know, I didn't know what was going on. And it impressed me so much that I mentioned it to my dad, and he had been listening to Coast to Coast AM as a truck driver. And he said, yeah, they call them chemtrails. And I was like, what? And I was just like, I can't believe I'm like having a legitimate conversation with my dad about we're being sprayed by some secret operation or something.
Did you say your dad was listening to Coast to Coast?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was a Krispy Kreme truck driver at third shift. And so it was like I was looking into the Illuminati, and he was listening to this and hearing about chemtrails and stuff, but neither one of us saw the big picture until that moment. And so I was like, you know what? I need to move to California. My clothing line, when my clothing line gets big, I become a famous rapper. When the world looks up to me, then I can tell them, you know, prophecy's true. Like, you know, this is all real, you know. That was my plan. And so I literally had all my furniture was moved into storage. I was sitting on the floor and everything. And it was like God just drew a line in the sand, and he said, you can have this dream. If you pursue it, it will happen. You see the sponsorships, the rubbing shoulders with celebrities, all this stuff, or you can lay it all down and follow what I have for you. And in that moment, I just said, whatever you want. I just want the truth. I said, whatever I see in your word, it's true. Whatever you want me to do, I'm going to do it. And I called my friend who had already moved out there, the girl that made the whole video happen. He was living with her, and he was calling me like every day, like, when you coming, man? And I remember saying a short little prayer. I just said, God, help him to receive this well, because I know he's not going to. And I called him. I said, man, I'm just not going to be able to come. Like, some things are changing in my life. And he goes, well, you know, maybe we can try next year or something. And I was like, what? Like, that was totally out of character for him. But right after that, I realized that I had this addiction that I couldn't give up. Habitual weed smoking, alcohol drinking, because the same cousin that told me to read the Bible saw my life, rapper and clothing line and all this stuff. And he was like, man, you're blessed, man. He said, you got all the girls like King Solomon. I was like, really? He goes, yeah, man, you get all the free alcohol, just like Jesus turned water into wine. He said, you know, Genesis says every green herb bearing seed is for man. And so here's my older, cooler cousin who's been studying the Bible for years before I had, giving me this type of advice and making me believe like I was blessed. And I believed it because I was like, well, he is telling me scripture. And but isn't that how Satan speaks? Yeah, isn't that how Satan speaks? Like, did God not say you could eat of every tree of the garden? Well, yeah, but you forgot the last part. 99% truth is not truth. And so he always loves to speak. Deception is a lot of truth with a little bit of error. It's not just an outward lie. And so I was sitting there struggling. I started reading the Bible finally for myself, and I'm seeing, be sober. We're in the last days. Satan's like a roaring lion. Be sober, be sober. Like over and over, I'm like, sober? I'm not sober any day. Not a day goes by that I'm sober. And so I was like, you know what? Today I'm not going to do it. I'm going to cut back. Is what I said. I'm going to cut back, because it was daily. And every day that I said, I'm not going to do it today. What's up, bro? I got some beer, man, some weed. Like, and I'd make excuses like, well, I didn't pay for it or whatever. Well, prior to that, I chose to be homeless for a year to like follow bands around with my clothing line and stuff. And even as a homeless person, I was getting to drink and smoke every day. So wow. You don't have to have money to get high and drunk. Like, people love to, you know, misery loves company. People like to get drunk with their friends or whatever. And so I a couple months went by, and I realized I'm an addict. I can't stop no matter how hard I'm trying in my own strength. And so New Year's 2013, I drank in the new year, and I was just laying there on the couch, and I said, God, I'm weak, but you are strong. I said, I give you permission, take this out of my life. I don't want it anymore. And because he's not a thief, he doesn't steal things that we're cherishing in any kind of way. But when you say a prayer genuinely saying, I don't want this, I give you permission to remove it, take it out of my life. I woke up the next day without a single withdrawal. And every day I had withdrawals. 30 minutes before I'd get off work, nauseous until I drank my magic beer. People say weed's not addictive, but every day I didn't have it or my friends didn't have it. We were irritable, spent the whole day looking for it. And I woke up with victory, freedom overnight. And that was the hardest part, you know. And then, of course, tempted every day, you know, I'm pumping gas at the gas station. There's a glowing beer sign on my face. And at that moment, I got to depend upon God. And I'd say, Lord, give me the strength not to go in there and buy a beer, and get to drive home in victory every day. So that was the start of a paradigm shift in my Christian walk. I kind of skipped
That's
a lot
awesome.
of details about when I really received Christ, but it was like 8 years that I didn't have any fruit or anything. But once I surrendered everything, God just started opening up doors left and right to be in ministry, to speak places. And that's what I try to tell people. The takeaways from my testimony is, one, don't judge people. You do not know where they're at. I've always been a truth seeker. I needed answers, and Christians didn't have answers for me. That was the problem. And so most people saw me all gothic, looking like Marilyn Manson. They don't even want to talk to me. And then the other thing is, don't ever stop praying for your family and friends, because my mom's prayers were answered. And don't be afraid to give up everything, because I thought God was going to take away all my dreams, because I loved making videos and graphics and t-shirts and being on stage place to place. And I thought that he was going to take that away from me. But when I finally surrendered, he gave me those gifts. I was using them the wrong way. Now I still make graphics. I still make t-shirts. I still make videos. I still get invited place to place to be on stage, but now it's not to glorify myself, but to glorify him. And
That's
so
awesome,
he
bro.
wants to use your gifts for him. And now, you know, I have
And
purpose in my
he's got
life.
some of his own gifts, so he'll let you use from time to time.
That's right. And so, I mean, there's nothing greater than being used by God and expanding his kingdom, because when you're living a life of drunk one night, it's just drunk one night, regret the next day, drunk again. It's just endless cycle, and you're not doing anything positive. And now, you know, even if I say something that's controversial and it's not really well received by everybody, at least it's the truth and it's a seed planted. And there's no greater feeling than that. I mean, it truly is like purpose in my life.
Yeah, we always let's talk about Mark 4:14 here on the channel. The sower sows the word.
Amen.
So we go out, we sow the word. The Father, he waters and he reaps where he did not heart plant,
Yeah.
because that's what the great King does. And it's just, it's just our ways of being hands and feet, as we're being sanctified in our walk with Christ as well. It's funny you mentioned that you used to dress goth and everything, and that it was become a part of your identity. Because I was at a Bible study many years ago, like 2002 maybe 2003, and there was three kids that showed up, and they were all decked out in black with goth makeup and eyeliner and lips, the black lips and everything, and they had showed up to the Bible study because someone had invited them. There's probably about 10 or 15 of us at the Bible study, and they just wanted to show up so they could mock it.
Yep. I've done that
Right.
stuff.
So we're sitting at the Bible study, and there was two guys and a girl, and then while we were there, I'm just praying for them as the Bible study is happening. Because I'm not leading the Bible study. I'm just sitting there as one of the participants, and I'm just praying for them. And I felt as if the Father showed me something about the girl that was with them, and so I was going through a period of my life where I was asking God to use me and let His gifts flow through me. And at this point, I was 4 years as a Christian, still a baby Christian. And I looked at this girl and I just saw things. I saw abuse that she'd endured, and so I just started praying for her, because there's never, I'm like, oh, it's just probably my imagination. But I started praying for her, and then I like clear as day, I heard the Father tell me, go tell her what you saw and tell her that I told you.
That'd be tough.
So after the Bible study, I go up to her, and I'm super nervous, you know.
Yeah, I
I go
bet.
up to her, and I'm like, "Hey, can I talk to you for real quick?" And so we're in this apartment, and it was just a 1 bedroom apartment, so it was like a whole bunch of people packed in there. And the guy's bedroom, who owned the apartment, it was like right there next to the main living room. His door was open, so we just stepped in there real quick, and I told her, I said, "Hey, I just want to tell you real quick that I feel like God wants me to tell you this." You know, and I told her, and she, because it was about her being abused as a child,
Yeah.
and she laughed because I told her, and I said, "Well, I just God wants to, you know, wanted me to tell you that he's going to heal you of that pain." And she laughed, and then
Did
her
you say
laughing
it that
turned.
vague, or did you say details? Or
No, I told her the details that I saw, and what age it happened to her when
wow,
she was 5 years old. And she laughed at me, and then her laughter turned into crying. And she
wow,
said, how did you know that? Who told you that?" And I told her, I was like, I told you, God told me. You know, I know how cliche that sounds, how
right,
ridiculous that some stranger at a Bible study, you know, comes up to you and says something that no one should know. You know,
yeah,
it's wild, right? And then her friends saw her crying, and they came in there. "What'd you do to her?" And I'm like, "No, Brad."
mm,
And then she was like, "No, he's okay. He didn't. Can we just go? Can we just go?" And so like she left. They all left. I told the guy whose apartment it was. I told him what happened because it caused a stir. Right? They're storming out of there all mad, um,
mm.
and she's in tears. And then like a few days later, I go back to that guy's apartment, and one of the guys, he was like 21, I think. He was there at that moment, but I didn't even recognize him. He
Wow,
had cut his hair off. His hair was down to the middle of his back. He had cut his hair off. It was like my hair now. He wasn't
wow,
wearing makeup. He was dressed in normal clothes. He was like completely different person.
wow.
And I didn't even realize I was staring at one of these kids that I'd seen previously a few days earlier. And so after he left, I was talking to this guy. I said, "Who was that?" And he was like, "You don't recognize him, do you?" I was like, "No, I
Wow,
don't." He's like, "That was one of those goth kids that showed up at the Bible study." And he was
that's
like, well, I said,
amazing.
"What?" I said, "What's going on?" He goes, "Well, after you left, they came back the next day, or that guy that just left here. He came back the next day, and he said, 'What'd your friend say to my friend?' You know, that made her cry." And he told her, and then he explained the gifts of the Spirit to him, and he explained how God's power can heal people of pain and hurt and all this stuff. And a demon started manifesting out of this kid.
Mm,
And so
wow.
he and his girlfriend at the time that were there, they just cast a demon out of this kid right there, right then and there.
Whoa.
And he radically changed. Like he stopped,
That's
like
amazing.
to the point where a few days later, I see him at the apartment. I don't even recognize him. He looks like a normal person, and he's got Bible in hand, and he's over there talking about God with the guy whose apartment it was. And
Wow.
yeah, it radically changed. And apparently, that girl, like it had a positive effect on her as well. So I never saw them again, but praise God. Hopefully that, you know, he continued to cultivate that in their life, and they're still
Yeah.
walking with him today. But like, it's just, you know, I wanted to ask you, when you were going through that phase and you were delving into looking into witchcraft and things like that, you said you didn't get a lot of results from it, but did you ever feel at any time like you had a demonic oppression in your life, or that it was affecting you or causing you to think things, or?
If my mom would share her testimony, it would just make my skin crawl. Like I'd want to leave the room. Her testimony was that she was raised in Baptist churches that always said, if you don't say this little prayer, you know, one time, it's once saved, always saved. If you don't say this prayer, you will burn for all eternity. And it just terrified her. She was like second grade. And every day she'd go, or every night, you know, she'd put her face in the bed and just say, Jesus, come to my life. And she'd say, whew, I hope that worked, because I sure don't want to burn in hell forever. Like, again, bad motive, you know, fear-based conversion. And when she was an adult, she realized that some of my dad's family had a relationship with God, that there was something different about them that she didn't never see in the churches that she went to growing up. And so we started hanging out with them a lot. And I didn't know, as a kid, I was just playing with my cousins and stuff, but my mom was really trying to see something happen or something change in her life. She's like, I need to know what it means to believe with my heart, because I'm always told, you can't believe with your head, you gotta believe with your heart and all this stuff. People are just overcomplicating the gospel, but God meets us where we're at. I mean, that's what's so cool about my story, because why would God get you a job at Hot Topic? A valid question. Like, why? Because he knew that if he answered my prayer at that time in my life, that I'd be here today doing what I'm doing today. He sees the beginning from the end. He is so intimately in tune with each and every one of us that he knows exactly what we need to prove to us that he's real. And if we still reject him, then we're never going to have an excuse at Judgment Day. And, when he really comes to you and gives you exactly what you need and you still reject it, then it's on you at that point. You can never say, well, I didn't know. And so for my mom, it was this belief thing. And my uncle was just reading the Bible and just scripture after scripture. My mom didn't even know why he was doing this. She's like, I asked him to pray for me, and he's sitting here reading the Bible, all these scriptures. But he got to a verse that said, believe in all things are possible to him that believeth. And all of a sudden it was like God took my mom in vision. She said it was like he tuned out like a radio in the background, and all of a sudden she's seeing this dictionary in front of her. And on the left page, the bottom column, it was God's perfect definition for what it means to believe. And she said she even saw herself standing on the edge of the earth. This was in 93 or something, man. She said, she said, I saw myself standing on the edge of the earth, and it was the game you used to play, the trust me game, where you have to fall backwards. And she said, God said, do you trust me? And I said, yeah. And she fell backwards, and she kind of came out of it. And she said, I can believe. Like, God made it real to her what it meant to believe, that he wanted a relationship with her, that she wasn't too far gone or whatever. It took away all the overcomplications and just made it real to her. And that was been her testimony. Her salvation testimony was this: believe in all things are possible. And so she would share it every chance she got to. And when I was going through this phase of life, every time she started, I was just like, oh, here we go again. Believe in all things are possible. And it made my skin crawl. And when me and my friend were both obsessed with Marilyn Manson and Nine Inch Nails, we started this like 2-man band, industrial gothic band. And he would play guitar. We refused to make music sober. We preferred to be high on marijuana, but if we didn't have it, we'd drink, But he would play the guitar, and I would just freestyle, and words would come out of me that rhymed, made sense, and were most of the time blasphemous. And I can't do that now. There was a time when I could just freestyle, even kind of rap freestyle. I can't do that anymore. And I think that was the demons working through me. Because for one, we're partaking in drugs, opening yourself up, and I'm sitting there wearing a pentagram and obsessed with Marilyn Manson. Like, I'm doing everything to invite Satan into my life. And here I am, just freestyling these blasphemous lyrics that rhyme and make sense and all that. So I never saw like supernatural things. Still to this day, I've seen 3 times. I've seen a green fireball fall from the sky. I don't know what that is, but my dad's seen it too. But I've never seen apparitions or anything. Now, when
you were looking into the magic concepts, were you just studying like white magic stuff, or did you ever get into the darker magics?
I was
Like
all
with
into
rituals and
anything
bloodletting
dark. Yeah,
Mm.
my room was decorated with black candles and skulls, and like real skulls. Like I would find animal bones and hang them up and stuff. And I don't even talk about all the stuff that I had done, but I was at a point where I was just like, I want to be more shocking than Marilyn Manson. And so,
Right. It's definitely some
yeah,
teenage rebellion, right?
yeah,
You're pushing as hard as you can to shock people with how against the norm, against the
right.
traditional value of Christianity that you can become. So I
Yeah,
definitely you see that a lot, and it makes me, what I'm hearing at least is, it seems as if even from childhood, you had a genuine good faith prayer to the Father, and even though you didn't get good answers, which I hope, by the way, I hope someone ever finally answered your Noah question.
Oh
So
yeah,
because there's definitely an answer for that,
yeah.
but even like, throughout, as you went to adolescence, as you became a man, you started to realize like you were more enticed by the world than by the discipline required to be a Christian at that time and the restraint.
Mhm.
And so I definitely understand that. That's definitely like
Yeah,
the young man's trial. You know what I'm saying? In this life,
right.
I struggled with that myself when I was younger, and I know that it seems as if God still kind of kept you like in his grasp a little bit, not to let you get too far off into the, because the reason I asked about dark magic is because like if you started doing certain types of rituals, sometimes that is just an absolute gateway to being possessed.
Right.
You know what I mean? Whereas
Yeah.
people trying to get into the white magic of, burning hair and stuff, and trying to make a love potion and things like that. So
Mhm.
it's interesting. It seems like God was still holding you that whole time, even though you were rebelling. He
Yeah.
was still like trying to be in your life, even with stuff like, oh, I'll give you a job, a hot topic, so that you acknowledge me. Whereas
Mhm.
I'm sure there's other people you could run into that would say, well, Hot Topic's an evil store. Why would he give you a job there? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Look at all the sexuality that's promoted in there, all the evil and all the satanic stuff. But yet he
Yeah.
got you a job there, and as a result, he's on your mind as a result of that.
That's right. And that's what I always say too when I share my testimony at churches, because I get invitations if anybody out there wants me to come to their church and share my testimony. But I always say, why would God get you a job? I said, I see some skeptical faces out there. Like, why would God get you a job at Hot Topic? I get it. And I say, when God didn't want the Israelites to have a king, they said, we want a king. We want a king. He said, you want a king? You got a king. They said, we
Mhm.
want meat. We're sick of the manna. You want meat? I'll give you so much meat. It's coming to your noses,
Mhm.
Sometimes God meets you where you're at because you are asking for it. It's like, all right, you asked for it, I'll give it to you. And sometimes it proves a point, or it just, I don't know. I mean, God just, he's so amazing how he works. It's different with everybody. And
Yeah, there's plenty of jobs that I got that I wanted when I was younger, that I realized they were not good for me. For
mm,
I could pick a reason, and I thought to myself like this one. I used to work at Chili's as a server
mhm,
when I was about 21, and then I needed some extra hours. Chili's wasn't giving them up, so I was like, all right, I have to get a second job. And then one of my tables one day are the managers of Victoria's Secret. And I jokingly said to them, "Hey, you hiring? I need a second job." And they gave me a
mm.
job on the spot.
Whoa, that's
And so
crazy.
I worked in the stocking room at Victoria's Secret, just like doing the little heat thing on all the lingerie to get all the wrinkles out.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's all I did for like 8 hours. It was
Wow.
gruesome. But this stocking manager that worked in that back room was this girl that was all into Pantera and Disturbed and Marilyn Manson and a whole bunch of Avenged Sevenfold, a whole bunch of other bands. And she hated the fact that I was a Christian. And
Hmm.
so we would just be back there. She was back there mocking me. In between mocking me, she would just be asking me about my faith and about the Bible. And and I realized, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't know if God got me this job or not, because
Mm,
this girl's attractive, but she's got a boyfriend, and I'm not trying to date people I work with, as a
mm,
general rule. And this girl's attractive, but yet she's clearly just needs to be given some good answers about the Bible. She's never been given them. She
yeah.
clearly seems to be hungry to know, even though she's mocking me in between, right? But I had
Mm,
to leave that job because I was like, I don't like the way I feel around her. I don't like the temptation I feel. You know what I
mm.
mean? And I also didn't like the job. I mean, just
Yeah.
steaming lingerie all day. It wasn't worth the money.
Yeah.
Um, but it was a weird time in my life for like 3 months. And I remember thinking to myself for years afterwards, did God give me that job or not? Did I have like
Mm,
a positive inflect on that girl, or did she have a worse influence on me? You know what I mean?
mm.
But all the
Yeah.
while, I did talk about God all day, every day, and she didn't,
That's
whether she
awesome.
wanted to hear it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a weird thing of like, it reminds me of Second Kings chapter 5 with a guy named Naaman that got healed of leprosy. And if
Yeah.
you remember the end of that story where Elisha heals him of leprosy, and he says to Elisha, "I got to go back home to Armenia, but I'm obligated by duty to go with my king into the temple of his God, and I don't want to be held guilty when I do that because
Mm.
I have to go in there and help him. He literally, according to the story, the king literally held onto his arm to be stabilized while he went into this pagan temple, and
Wow.
this guy Naaman, who just got healed of leprosy and is now wanting to worship the Most High God of Israel, is asking the prophet Elijah, will God hold me guilty if I do my duty to help this guy? Because I'm not going to worship at that temple, but I have to go there to
Mm.
help him. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
Elisha said, "You're fine. Go ahead, just fine." You know what I
Wow.
mean? But like, it's just about circumstance. The world would
Mhm.
say, "How dare you go into that temple? How dare you
Right.
go into Hot Topic? How dare you
Yeah.
go work where there's nothing but women in lingerie?" You know what I mean?
Mm.
But yet, I'm not there for those reasons, and I'm just in my mind I'm remembering God the whole time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because at some point we have to draw the line when Christ tells us to go to the nations and tell them about Christ. We have to draw the line of like, all right, well, am I gonna create an isolated protected zone where I feel comfortable to tell these people about Christ, or am I gonna go to where they are?
Mm. Exactly.
In their dirt, in their
Yeah.
mire? Am I going to get down in the pit and help them out, or am I going to stand up from the pit and just say, "Climb out yourself"? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's, there's like you have to sometimes make some mature decisions, and I think the Father will build us in our walk and our discipline to be able to be in those situations, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? Like
Yep.
they were mature enough to be in Babylon and be willing to die to not worship a false god. And then they got blessed and promoted as governors of Babylon at the end of that story, which
Rejected the
means,
way they told them to eat and everything.
yeah, which means though, at the end of the story, they now were in positions of authority and power to have a positive influence on masses of people in their positions of
Mhm.
governorship. You know what I mean? As opposed to them cowering and then just still being the slave class,
Yeah.
so they stood out because of their righteousness while in the lion's den, so to speak, the heart of Babylon. So it's like, I just want to encourage people because I know what you're saying here. I can hear it already. I can hear this
Right.
overly religious people being like, man, that wasn't God. I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, I've had God. I've had opportunities. I was young too, right? When I was 20, I
Mhm.
went to a club, didn't realize it was a gay club,
Oh no.
right? Oh yeah, I left very quickly. I
Yeah.
realized once I got in there very quickly. So as I'm leaving, this girl grabs me and she's like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I was like, "I didn't know what this place was. I'm trying to get out of here." She's like, "Oh yeah, me and my friend saw you walk in. We were laughing at you when we were walking. We know you're not gay." And I was like, because they could
That's
just
hilarious.
look across the room and know that I'm not gay, right?
Right.
So they were like, "What's this straight guy doing walking in here?" And I was so naive. I was in a new city. I was so naive. I had no clue. I like you at that age. I was just looking for a club to go visit and see what's going on in this city, right?
Yeah.
And I leave, and before I leave, this girl grabs me and she's like, she ends up becoming my hairstylist for 2 years.
Wow.
To which she introduced me to her gay friends so that I could tell them about God.
Wow, dude.
And so because she was like, as she's cutting my hair, I would tell her who I was and I believe in Christ, and so since she would invite me to get-togethers with her friends so that I could tell them about God, and there's all gay guys, and
Wow.
uh, and so at the end of it, long story short, she ended up moving back to her family in Ohio, and she had like an emotional breakdown one night as I was trying to talk to one of her friends about God, and he was rejecting it, but God was working on her
Wow.
because she's listening to me trying to witness to this guy, and her friends they were like, "Why are you bringing this guy around?" Like, her name was Sarah, but they all called her Mookie. And they were like, "Why are you bringing this guy around? Like, he's just religious. He wants to talk about God all the time." And I'm like, and she's like, "No, you guys need to hear it. Like, he's not like the normal religious people. Like, it makes sense." And then
Yeah.
apparently, after so many times, it made enough sense to her to where she ended up started crying, and she cried for like 2 hours, and her friend left, and her friend was mad, and I just ended up reading the Psalms over while she cried for like 2 hours,
Wow.
and then I went to go try to check on her the next day, and her roommate said that she had packed up and moved back to her parents' house. And
Wow,
so
dude.
her parents were religious, and she had moved out to Oklahoma in rebellion because she had been a runaway bride. She had been
Hmm.
betrothed to a youth pastor and had
Wow.
been full on church girl, but she had this rebellious streak that hit, and she ran
Wow.
away. She was a runaway bride, moved to a different state, living up, going to clubs, hanging out with gay people, doing
Hmm.
everything but church, everything but God. And here I come right?
That's
And
amazing.
walking accidentally into this gay club. And then at the end of the
Whoa.
story, it turns out that she went back and reconciled with her parents and moved back to her hometown. And her gay roommates who answered the door were like, "What'd you say to her?" And I was like, I don't know. I was just telling her friend about God, and they're like, "Yeah, well, she was like freaking out all night, and she called her parents, and they reconciled, and she's like, you don't understand how much she hates her parents." I was like, well, it sounds like she doesn't still hate her parents.
Wow.
So just little stuff like that. God can use even in our mistakes, even in our
Right.
stupidity. Look, full disclosure, I wasn't going to that club to be an innocent little Christian boy at the time.
Right.
I'm
Exactly.
like 2 years old in Christ, and I'm still a young man at 20 years old. Like I
Yep.
wasn't going to that club to do anything righteous, I promise. But God used that event, even in my stupidity,
Yep.
um, because he still had his spirit in me, prompting
Yeah.
me, trying to get me into continual repentance and away from that foolishness. Like Timothy talks about, flee sexual immorality, young man. I mean, it's like a thing you've got to ever presently and ever vigilantly trying to resist. But
Right.
man, I'm excited to hear your testimony. So you are at this point, you've remarried and you've started a new channel, Candid Truth.
Yep.
And what's your focus with this channel?
So we look at uh, current events through the lens of the Bible, prophecy, things like that. Like I said, if you're familiar with Little Light Studios, it's sort of like that. But so my wife now, she a year and a half ago, something like that, came to Little Light to give one presentation, and it was all about who runs the world, and like the elites and all that stuff. And it was such a good video, such a good presentation that they offered her a job on the spot, which never happens. I mean, there's people all the time that say, I want to work at Little Light and all this stuff. And they're like, well, we're not hiring and all that. They offered her a job on the spot. And I was in this place where my mom she had this stroke. She's not in her right mind at all. My dad's having to work and take care of her. He had a friend that was watching my mom while he'd go to work and come back, and I'm an only child, and I was just feeling guilty. Like for the last year that I was working at Little Light, I'd be like working on this amazing video. I'm like, man, I love Little Light. Every day I never dreaded a day of work. For the first time in my life, by Sunday, I was already ready to get back to work because I was working on a project. And I'd be sitting there working on a video, and then it would hit me like, man, my mom's in this condition and my dad's having to deal with, take care of her and all this stuff. And I just felt like I needed to be more available to help my dad if he needed me. And I didn't want to have to ask for permission to drive and, to leave work and drive like almost an hour to meet my dad. I was like, if I could work from home, it would be so much better because I'm only 30 minutes away. I don't have to ask for permission to leave, but they didn't have any work from home jobs available. They weren't willing to work remotely and stuff. And so I was in that situation. Then Aubrey came, my wife, and she was working. And so some months went by, and she's having the same feelings because she actually did a presentation on the holidays, and it was just exposing like every holiday, boom, boom, boom. And one of the guys was like, yeah, I'm so glad you're doing this because we've got this question a lot over the years and it's a sensitive topic, and you have a good way of presenting it. And so she went through this whole thing, and then like weeks went by and it hadn't come out yet, and she was asking like, when's that video coming out? And they're like, well, we want to talk about that and they just felt like it was, I don't know, a little too sensitive of a topic. And I think it was kind of hitting home with some of the people there, even maybe. And so it never aired. And so, I was reaching a place where I was like, I think we should talk about truth no matter what. I mean, we talk about yoga. We say yoga's of the devil, and like we know people are doing it and that are in church. We say all these movies you love, they got these satanic messages, and,
Yoga pants are of the devil.
yoga pants. Yeah. And so we openly bash all this stuff that we know people are involved in, but yet when it came to the holiday, it was like too sensitive a topic. So, she was starting to feel like, man, I wish I could talk about this. God's really put it on my heart. And I was feeling like well, I want to be working from home. And during that time, we had grown a lot closer. We realized that we were on the same page with everything, same convictions, same beliefs, and we were starting to fall for each other. And she had actually had a previous marriage too. That was what was going through. That's the hard thing that she was going through when I had met her a long time ago. And so we both knew like what we were looking for, and we weren't trying to be engaged for a year or anything like that. We're just like, we want to be right in God's eyes. We don't want a big wedding. We we're both what we've been looking for. Somebody who's on the same page in every way. And so we quickly got married, and then it was just on our heart. Like, we need to start our own ministry. We need to work from home. We need to talk about what's on our heart without any, having to go through rank or whatever, just talk about whatever we want to talk about. Yeah. And so, she had some money in savings and stuff. And I was like, what if we step out in faith and try to do this ministry? And if it doesn't work out in a couple months, worst case scenario, I just go back to work. I can join the workforce again. But in the first month, we had people donate to us, and it was enough to make mortgage. And then the next month was mortgage and bills. And then the next month was mortgage, bills, and groceries. And we were just seeing God work. And we're like, and then we started praying, Lord, we want to make what we made before, so that we don't have to struggle and, live check to check. And at the end of the year, because we had started halfway in the year, so 6 months in, rich people have to give away money at the end of the year. I've never had that problem. I don't know anything about that, but they have to give money away at the end of the year so they don't get taxed. And so we got way more than we expected in December. And when I calculated how much we made in that 6 months, it was exactly what we both made when we were working at Little Light before. And we're just like,
wow,
man, like, so even though we weren't seeing it month to month, it's like the stock market. It's like sometimes it's high, sometimes really low. And then it's like, he made up for it all at the end of the year. And it was just like, wow, like, he's really answering our prayers. And it really just solidified to us that this is what he's called us to do. And, we've got to talk about anything we want to, anything that God puts on our heart. But yeah, if you check out Candid Truth, you'll see a lot of the holiday stuff. You'll see we talked about the Olympics, the pagan origins of the Olympics. We talk about went to
I got
Washington.
one of your videos. I got one of your shorts queued up. Can I play it real quick?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
Candid Truth.
I don't think what we see Christianity today, I don't think it's the same Christianity that we saw back in the Bible days. I think what we see today is a lukewarm Christianity that looks nothing like what it originally used to look like. I grew up in church, wasn't hearing the truth in church. What is the truth? And I opened up God's word, and it changed my life. The rest is history. It changed my life forever. God's word is powerful, sharp like a two-edged sword. And I think everybody here knows that we believe the Bible. We teach the Bible alone, not tradition, not emotions or feelings. And we've actually been growing on this channel with you guys, smashing our DVDs, inspiring you guys to get things out of your house that shouldn't be in there. And we're all in this together. We're growing and learning, and we all want to get closer to God. That's what I believe we're all here for. Look, Satan loves to use scripture. 99% truth is not truth. But seek the truth, the candid truth.
Nice.
That was awesome, man. I was mentioning that we went to DC. I don't know if you see that short, but that would be a cool one to show. But that was definitely a divine appointment. So we had kind of went on a trip for the first time together to the Keys, kind of our honeymoon thing. We didn't really get to have a honeymoon because the way we did everything, but we went out there, and on the flight back to Tennessee, we landed in North Carolina, and a big storm happened, and they said, well, we can't get you back to Tennessee tonight, but we can send you to Washington, DC to stay for 2 nights, and then you can go back to Chattanooga. And we're like, okay, it seems kind of weird, but whatever, we got to do. So they paid for us to go to Washington, D.C., put us in a hotel and all that. After 2 days of being in Washington, D.C., they sent us right back to the same airport in North Carolina and then sent us to Chattanooga. So I was like, why wouldn't they have just said, oh, well, you're in North Carolina and we're going to put you in a hotel here, and 2 days later you're going to go to Chattanooga? For some reason, they sent us to Washington, D.C. It still blows my mind. I have no reason. I have no explanation. But while we were there, I was like, well, why don't we go, walk around and see if we see anything, some symbols or something. And dude, we were just mind blown at what we saw. And we took videos of everything and did a whole show on it. This is not a Christian nation, never has been. And we show that in the video. And
Oh,
a lot
is
of
it
it's
the
in the
video
short.
called Hidden in Plain Sight?
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to find it where you're talking. 1 second here.
So I totally believe that God orchestrated that, because there's no reason why we ended up there.
Just because of a redirected layover. That's interesting. Yeah, DC is just flushed with occultic symbolism.
Yeah.
It is
And yet
wild.
everybody thinks, well, this is a Christian nation. No, never has been.
Yeah, some of the founders were deists, and a lot of people don't realize what that is, and they just think, oh, well, they were a type of Christian, but no, that's not what a deist is. So,
what would you say this is, like God is in everything type thing? And that's pantheism.
Yeah, not pantheism, but just like they like Thomas Jefferson was a deist. He actually tried to like create his own version of the Bible by making large edits to the Bible that we currently have.
Oh wow!
And so basically, it's like they do believe in a God, but they don't necessarily attribute Jesus Christ as the Son of God or the plan for salvation and all that kind of stuff. But they do believe that we're created and there's a
higher power.
It's more, it's more like a veiled version of Masonry.
Yeah.
Which, me personally, I what little research I've done into Masonry, it seems as if once you get past the third degree, that's when you get into the higher levels of being revealed what it's really all about. Because I, from what I was told, within the first 3 degrees of Masonry, they let you still maintain your Christian beliefs.
Right.
So basically, like, you can run around saying you're a Mason and a Christian and be genuine, because they haven't told you the truth yet. So I heard this interview with a guy that said he was like a 32nd degree or whatever. And he said when he got up to like the 28 or 29th degree, they did this ceremony with him to where they pulled out these Egyptian statues and they said, here's the true God. They're like,
wow.
you can't be a Christian if you get to this point. Like, we are going to tell you the truth. Here's the true grand architect. Here's the true God. And they called him Jabulon. And they had all this, the Egyptian statues and everything they pulled out and doing this whole ceremony for him, basically. And he eventually got out of the Masons, so he said in this interview. And I believe he said he was a Christian, or he had denounced all that stuff, and he is, because he realized you couldn't be a Christian after 3rd degree.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I think I got your video queued up though at this point. 1 second.
Yeah.
Because that could be a fun video. Let me see here.
Somebody in the chat mentioned Nashville too. We actually went to Nashville and got footage, and we haven't done anything with it yet. But what's her name? 40-foot golden goddess inside the Parthenon.
Oh yeah, that's right. They built that whole fake temple to Diana. Athena. Yeah.
I can't
that's
believe
wild,
it, dude.
man. Nashville is there's a lot of Christians that live there, but the city planners and movers and shakers, there's a lot of occultic symbols in there too.
Yeah, they have a yearly witch festival thing there at that Parthenon, and they offer fruits and everything to that goddess. Wow. It's crazy.
Your video is processing. I'm trying to upload it to my studio so we can make sure we get the best sound quality before we play it. Because sometimes
West Blaze says we got to get together and talk about the kingdom. I'm down, man. I love chatting with you guys, man. It's always fun.
Yeah, this is a question I ask a lot of people. Do you think that the New Jerusalem is literal or figurative?
Literal? I mean, I wouldn't think figurative. I don't know.
A lot of people are taught that it's figurative. It's all allegory, metaphor. But so I just try to ask people from time to time, like, what do you view the kingdom of heaven as? Do you think it's literally the heavenly country that Abraham looked for, like Hebrews 11 talks about? Like it's literally a country coming down out of heaven.
I would think so. I mean,
I do.
it's the cube, right? The cube
Yeah,
or pyramid.
it describes it as 4 square city,
Right.
being as high as it is as wide and long.
Yeah.
So
I've heard some people say they think it could be a pyramid shape. I don't know. I'm not against it. I don't think, it can't be because Illuminati and all that. Satan hijacks everything. Satan knows what the kingdom of heaven looks like. He could have made the capstone and mockery or whatever of the kingdom, but I tend to think it's a cube. I don't know, but
yeah, I like to say God,
a cult too.
The creator of heaven and earth, created geometry and not Satan.
That's right.
But he likes to take what the Father made and then try to make symbols out of it for himself. So yeah, here's your video. I think it's finally done processing.
Okay.
Actually, it's stuck at 90%. That's weird.
This is one of my favorites because, like, just how it all happened, and just because I don't know, so many people don't know. I mean, we went there physically and took the videos ourselves. We're not just like Googling images and stuff. And when you first get to the entrance, there is a giant statue of Zeus and a fountain. I mean, it's like a huge like fountain of Zeus. And when you go in there, there's literal names of gods, Apollo. I can't even remember, but it's all in your face.
The Greek
Minerva.
Yep, Minerva. Yeah.
I mean, there's tons of sun symbolism. A lot of people just kind of think, whatever, sun, that's just decorative or whatever, but it's not. When you see, and that's what I try to tell people, I never make a whole case out of one thing. Like if I'm showing you some movie and I'm like, look, they call him Lord or something, I don't ever make a case out of one point. I'm like, so Darth Vader, for example, we know Star Wars is supposed to be like good versus evil, light versus dark or whatever, but these movies always flip the script to where God's the bad guy, the hero is Satan. And so the villain in Star Wars, his name is Lord Vader, Father. He wears the colored buttons on his chest, like the ephod the high priest wears. He's the ruler over the empire. All his soldiers are in perfect white and in uniform. You know, they stand at perfect order, whereas the good guys are the rebellion. And, you know, Luke, which means light, is like the light bearer. Why was I talking about this? Oh, Lord Vader was actually, when they asked who was his father, the mother was like, there was no father. I can't explain it. I was just pregnant. And when you read the comics, it says the same thing. It says it was like an unnatural birth. It was supernatural. They call him the prophesied chosen one. So if you remove the concept of the movie, you have to do this sometimes because people get so wrapped up. No, he just looks evil. That's propaganda. That's like spray painting horns on a picture of somebody. And it's like, look, he looks evil. So you have to remove the visuals and just look at the character traits. Who is out there in the galaxy or, you know, out there in the heavens, who's called Lord, Father? Well, it's kind of like a blend, I guess, of Christ and the Father, but he had no father. He was born into a mother that had no father. He wears the ephod. There's Hebrew writing in between those buttons. He's the ruler of the empire. His army is in perfect white and perfect order. You know, all of that is describing Christ or the Father. And so when people always like see a video like that, breaking that stuff down, and they're like, oh, there's been, you know, there's been a lot of movies where people are called Lord or something. And it's like, okay, well, it's not just that point. That's one of the pieces of the puzzle. You got to look at the 10 pieces of the puzzle. And so the same thing with, you know, going to Washington, DC. If I just saw a bunch of sun symbols everywhere and I made a video about that, I could understand why people would say, well, it's just decorative. People just think the sun is, you know, beautiful or whatever. But it's not just that. You'll see in this video.
Okay. Let me play this real quick.
No sound.
You hear?
No sound.
There's no sound?
No sound, yeah.
You don't have any sound? You guys hear that in the chat? That's weird.
that first one.
Oh, that's the wrong video. That's not it.
But that's a cool one too.
Huh,
Can you play
that's
that one?
kinda weird. Yeah, we can just play that one if you like instead.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I don't know
You guys
why
check out the
it's
Washington
weird.
DC video. I forgot about all the faces in that video, but that's interesting stuff. You know, God really just knocked the blinders off me and my wife, and we just see stuff like that. He's really given us a gift of discernment, and that's not to brag. It's all him, man. I was blind as they come. I mean, I was Marilyn
Yeah.
Manson, you know, but that's interesting. You know, WWW is 666. It's all about the knowledge of good and evil. We weren't ever supposed to have the knowledge of evil, but that's what's all over the web, you know, and it's literally called a web or the net, things that trap prey. And the computer language for writing websites is from a program called Python. Stuff that I didn't include in there because you only get a minute, and that's why it's so fast, was Daemon is another computer language. There's like wizards, you know, every time you install software, you use a wizard to install your software.
Mhm.
I mean, everything about computers has to do with witchcraft, and that, you know, the Apple being on the Mac computer, you could say, well, it's really not, it was something about Newton's apple or whatever, but how come in the advertisement they show Adam and the snake while he's holding that computer, and the first computer was $666.66. I mean, it's just insane how it's so much in our face like that.
Yeah, specifically with the 666, it's interesting because have you seen my Investigating Babylon series on the Mark of the Beast?
No, I haven't seen that one anyway.
So there's the conclusion I've come to through my research is that the Mark of the Beast is the second beast. So the second beast makes an image of the first beast,
Right.
which then goes throughout the world and causes it to worship it. But
Right.
the object of worship is the first beast, his image. But it's the second beast who is initiating that enforcing it, right? Killing people if they don't worship it. And it says, and then he goes on to say, and it's the number of his name, it's the number of man, 666. And a lot of people have always thought, well, it must be the number of the first beast, but actually it's the second beast. And there's a ton of evidence to show.
That'd be interesting.
Show it real quick.
Yeah.
I'll pull up this video real quick for my series.
Somebody said Monster Energy drink. Yep. The Vav,
yeah.
Vav, Vav, yeah.
Yeah, so if I do, hang on. That's not it. Okay. So this is, let me just see if I can find it real quick. So it's all about Anubis as the second beast. There is I go through all the history, but there's also the symbolism, like you were talking about with the 666.
Yeah.
There is, in the ancient world, in Hermeticism, which is attributed to Hermes.
Yeah.
Who was also called Nergal in the Canaanite Mesopotamian region. But Hermes is the one that's attributed to Hermeticism. And did you know, because you mentioned www, did you know, like, if you look at your browser link many times when you go to a payment portal to buy something online, it'll say Hermes dot and then all the information past it?
I did not know. That's crazy.
Yeah. Hermes was the one associated with advanced knowledge. He is the Greek equivalent to the second beast in my research.
Well, he's carrying the
The Caduceus, yeah,
the Caduceus staff, which is
that's right.
he's the god of he's protector of liars and merchants and thieves, and he's the guide of the dead and all that.
Oh man, I don't know where it went. I thought it was in this video, but there's a in mathematics, what used to be represented in ancient Greek for Zeus. I can't even, man. That must not be the right video. I'm sorry, man. Let me take this off screen. So I can't remember which video it is. I apologize. The Investigating Babylon series is like 21 parts, and I'm doing the 42 series, and I've got like 6 installments in that already. So, but I go into this type of stuff as well, as far as, you know, the symbolism that's encoded in everything. And in ancient Greece, they would represent the the Trinity of Zeus, Apollo, and Hermes, and they would represent it with as a big sphere, and then 2 spheres that fit inside the diameter of the big sphere, and then 3 little spheres that fit inside the diameter of the big sphere.
I see you doing that sign, bro. I'm just kidding.
Right, exactly. I'm done.
Screenshot.
Life. People are going to be clipping that now. So basically these little spheres, this, like, imagine a big circle and then 2 circles that touch edge to edge that fit inside the big circle, and then 3 circles that touch edge to edge fit inside the big circle. And it's supposed to represent Zeus as the big circle, Apollo and Hermes are the other circles inside, and the circles for Hermes, according to their measurements, line up to be 666.
Is that, I mean, I'm trying to visualize it. Is that the Olympic rings? You said 2 circles and 3 circles?
Okay. No, it's a part of Hermeticism. It's like the math cult of ancient Greece, which basically, like, I don't know if you realize this or not, but in ancient Greece, Zeus's original form was a serpent. A lot of people don't know this. It's like, so in ancient Greece, they represented Zeus at different eras in their history, you know, because the Greeks were around for a long time. Yeah. So they had like at different time, but the earliest representation of Zeus, he was a serpent. And Hermes was represented as different characters in different ways. But basically, they had the head trinity, is what they would call it within ancient Greece, which was Zeus, Apollo, and Hermes. And or also Hermes was also called Hades from time to time. He had the Cerberus, the 3-headed dog.
Oh yeah.
So they had different the different representations. They would just call them, you know, different anthropomorphic representations depending on which story of mythos they were being described as. Whereas the Hindus would just refer to it as a different avatar. So that's where the word avatar came from. Right? Avatar, and wow. So, because do you know that Buddha is an avatar of Hermes? So the Buddha, I did not know that. The Buddha is considered the 9th avatar of Vishnu, and Vishnu is the Hindu equivalent to Hermes. So wow, who is the beast, whose name means 666, whose mathematical calculations. So in ancient Greece, do you remember growing up in school, remember hearing about Pythagoras? We had to learn in geometry about Pythagoras' theorem.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A squared plus B squared equals C squared.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pythagoras was a serpent worshipping cultist.
Wow.
So serpent worship. They used their mathematics as a part of their occult serpent worship.
And then they teach it to us in high school or whatever.
This is why the encoding, the symbolism, the mathematical properties that are encoded within the symbolism. It all goes back to ancient serpent worship. It's wild.
Wow, man.
It's wild. There's a lot to it.
In DC, we saw a lot of that. There's so many things on the ceiling, all this art that's hard to see with it just with your eyes. But if you zoom in on your phone, you can see it. And there's a lot of the serpent in the tree, somebody talking to a serpent in the tree and stuff. There was something, it was a plaque that said, "Man is the true Shekinah." Maybe a Shekinah glory or something. I was like, dude, this is so insane. Yeah. Like right in your face.
Yeah, that's pure Gnosticism. So basically, like, there's also in DC, there's a lot of the owl. You see the owl in certain spots. Sometimes he's hidden in certain doorways. Yeah. And also you probably saw the gardens around the Capitol building that looks just like the owl from an aerial view. Have you ever seen that picture?
Yep. Well, they have the maps right there. Like when you're walking outside, there's a huge, like this, here you are. And they outline the thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bad. And of course, an owl is another representation historically. It's the modern representation historically of the ancient bull of Molech.
Yeah. I only knew that because of Bohemian Grove,
Mm-hmm.
and that owl was Moloch. But most of the time you
it's
look at
funny.
Moloch, it looks like a bull.
I did a video, like one of my most popular videos on my channel, I made with my phone while lying in bed one night. And it's like
That's
a
awesome.
3-minute video. And it was with a crappy phone with bad graphics
Yeah.
and everything. And it's about Molech and about his symbolism on the dollar bill and places in DC and Bohemian Grove. And it's also with, I show that the United Nations meditation room, they have a painting to Molech in there and a stone altar.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever seen that?
I think now that I know, is it like it's brass and it's got its mouth open like and it's got its hands like gripping the
No. That's in some place in Rome that they just
Oh,
they put
okay.
that out for public display. But
Yeah.
let
I don't know
me
about
show
what
this
you're
to you
talking
real
about.
quick. I'll show you real quick. If I can even remember the video.
There's some great comments.
It should be in my popular videos real quick. A second here. Yeah, the title of the video is called Molech at the United Nations. Here, I'll play it real quick. Let me know if you can hear the sound.
Okay. Yep.
So this is their meditation room. They have a stone altar in front of this painting.
I have seen this. I didn't know what it was even.
So I was looking at this painting. I was like, why is this the only painting in that room?
Yeah, it's so abstract.
And I decided, what if I flipped the painting? I mirrored the painting on top of itself, and then adjusted the levels back to normal. What would it? Because I had an inkling, I had a suspicion, and so I flip it back on itself.
That's an owl face.
It's an owl.
Wow, dude, what? That is crazy.
Yeah.
Straight up.
In front of an altar. So the symbol for Molech, which is child sacrifice, is in the UN meditation room in front of an altar. So just in case anyone watching is unaware of whom the nations are serving.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And it's also the logo of the Planned Parenthood, the ally.
Oh, the owl eye, yeah. Whoa, no way.
And it's also in their literature. And here's one of the secret societies in Washington, D.C., whose artwork is a part of the owl.
Look at the Pope miter and everything.
Mm-hmm. There's the D.C. Capitol. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, dude.
It's in our face, and this is, I mean, they speak in code and symbolism. And then if you zoom in on the dollar bill, the owl's hidden in the top.
I've seen that ever since I was a kid, and I said it was a spider, but it is an owl for sure.
Yeah.
Wow, good catch with that abstract
What are you
art.
meditating on in there, bro? That's crazy.
Wow, that is insane.
Yeah, it's weird, man. It's
Dude, we gotta have you on sometime and give a
if you listen
presentation
real
like
closely,
that.
if you listen real closely in that video, you can hear my wife snoring next to me in bed.
No way. Are you kidding?
She's not technically snoring. You can hear her breathing heavy.
But I mean, there was no.
nice
It was just. I thought it was just music overlaid on there.
Yeah, but there's some quiet parts, and if you turn it up real loud, that's her you hear breathing. It's pretty funny because I was literally trying not to wake her, and I was messing with KindMaster, and I was trying to make this video real quick. We had just started our channel. It was funny, and
Wow.
but yeah, bro, you're a blessing. I've got to wrap it up. I got to go eat dinner with the fam, but
Yeah, definitely, man.
guys, Candid Truth is in the video description below, so go give them a sub.
There's a little plug too. We got a brand new book. It's a free resource for kids, probably age 10 and under. Abby's Strange Dreams. It's the first spiritual warfare book for kids. She has encounters with aliens, an angel that says you can talk to the dead loved ones, a dragon, things in her life start going wrong. She tells her mom says, you need to read, put on the full armor of God, and cast these things out. And so at the end, she sees their true colors. She tells them to leave in the name of Jesus Christ. She has on the full armor of God, and they flee. And right now, there's so much propaganda about aliens are your friends, especially with this new Disney Pixar movie called Alio. So if you guys want to get that, candidtruth.org, click on merch and order your free copies that you can pass out to all the kids you know.
Yeah, I actually have it in my watch later list, your Elio review video. So I'm gonna be watching it later.
Check that, bro.
Yeah.
Thank
They're
you
trying
so
to get
much
the
for
kids,
having
as
me
always.
on, man.
Yeah, man, we have to do this more often. Like Westplay said, we need to get you on. We need to get to another roundtable discussion. Talk about current events. Talk about the kingdom. Talk about false prophecies. Talk about wars and rumors of wars. All the things that's happening. You know what I'm saying?
I'd love it, man. Let's do it. And I want to have you on sometime too on our channel. Talk about some of that stuff that you got.
Yeah, cool, if you'd like, I can come on and talk about the occult symbolism of the labyrinth. I've done actually a presentation at different virtual conferences. People seem to walk away with something to remember from that, because it's in a ton of movies. I go through all the movies and TV shows and the Catholic churches and the all the different places where the occult concepts and the history of ancient Egypt about the labyrinths and about how it was as well as ancient Greece and all the demonic influence involved in it, but how it's perpetually put into movies and ideas, and it's even being taught in a lot of churches nowadays, and they putting labyrinths in their courtyards for people to go walk the labyrinths. It's a whole
prayer labyrinth thing.
Yeah, I can, if you like.
Crazy.
I mean, I think people.
I love that. Totally love that, dude. Let's set that up.
Cool, bro. All right, man. Guys, go check out Candid Truth. Have a blessed night. Thanks, Mikey. We'll talk to you later.
See you later.
All right, guys. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate everyone. If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoyed this content in this video, go check us out. If you want to, support what Mikey's doing, go check him out. He's over there. If you want to support what we're doing, hit us up on Patreon below. We appreciate you. We'll see you next time.